You think your heart is reacting to what's happening right now? It isn't. By the time you feel that first surge, that sudden climb in your chest, your body had already made the decision 300 milliseconds before you were consciously aware of anything. Your heart didn't respond to the moment. It anticipated it. The system running that calculation has never once asked for your permission. Most people spend their entire lives believing their heartbeat is a passive measurement, a readout, something that simply goes up when things get intense and comes back down when they pass. You feel it, you label it, you move on. And the mechanism behind it stays completely invisible, running exactly as it was built to. Beneath the surface of everything you think you understand about your own reactions, that belief is wrong at the biological level. Your heart doesn't measure your experience, it shapes it. And once you understand exactly how that works, once you see the precise sequence your body runs every single time that surge hits your chest, you will never interpret that feeling the same way again. Here's exactly what's happening inside you, and why it changes everything. Deep inside your brainstem, there is a structure that never sleeps. It doesn't wait for conscious input. It doesn't analyze context or weigh your options. It reads patterns, biological patterns built from hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary data, and it fires the moment it detects a signal that matches anything in its archive. Within 50 milliseconds of that signal, your autonomic nervous system activates. Your sinoatrial node, the electrical command center sitting in the upper right chamber of your heart, receives a direct chemical signal. Norepinephrine binds two receptors on that node and increases its firing rate, not gradually, not after deliberation, immediately. By second 3, your heart rate has already climbed. By second 8, blood is being actively pulled away from your digestive system and skin, redirected toward your large muscle groups. By second 15, your respiratory rate has shifted. Your pupils have widened, and your liver has already begun releasing stored glucose directly into your bloodstream. Every single one of those steps completed before you finished forming a single conscious thought about what was happening around you. This entire sequence runs below the threshold of awareness. You feel the result, that surge, that pressure, that sudden aliveness in your chest. But the mechanism that produced it had already completed its first 3 phases before the feeling ever reached the surface. This is not a signal that something is wrong. This is a biological preparation sequence refined across hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary pressure, running exactly as it was designed to, for exactly this kind of moment. Think about the last time your heart climbed unexpectedly, not from physical effort, but from a moment, a conversation that shifted, a room you walked into, decision that suddenly felt real. What was your body already doing before you named what you were feeling? Because that gap between what your biology already knew and what your conscious mind caught up to is exactly where this mechanism lives. Here's where it gets deeper. And this is the part that almost nobody explains. Your heart doesn't just receive signals from your brain. Research now shows it sends more information upward toward your brain than your brain sends down to it. The vagus nerve, the primary communication pathway running between your heart and your central nervous system, carries signals in both directions. But 80% of the traffic moves upward, from heart to brain. Your heart is not a passive pump waiting for orders. It is an active signaling organ that continuously informs your brain about the state of your internal environment beat by beat, in real time, without pause. Studies show that the rhythm of your heartbeat directly influences your perception speed, your decision-making clarity, and your emotional processing capacity. When your heart rate variability, the subtle natural variation between individual beats, is high, your prefrontal cortex operates with measurably greater efficiency. Attention sharpens, pattern recognition accelerates. Your capacity to regulate emotional responses becomes more precise and more available. When that variability drops, when your beats become rigid and mechanical, cognitive flexibility measurably decreases. Your brain receives a fundamentally different signal from your heart, and it recalibrates everything accordingly. This means that every time your heart rate climbs, you are not simply experiencing a physical change happening somewhere in your chest. Your brain is receiving a continuous real-time data stream from your cardiovascular system and using that stream to decide how to process everything around you. The surge you feel is not a side effect of the response. It is part of the information architecture your brain relies on to determine what comes next. Your heart and your brain are running a conversation that never stops, and your conscious mind is only ever reading the summary. What does it mean that the organ you thought was simply reacting to your experience is actually helping to construct it?
Ow.
Sit with that question for a moment, because where it leads changes more than most people expect. Now here is where this connects directly to the life you are living right now. Your heart's activation system evolved to respond to discrete time-limited signals. A sudden physical demand, an immediate environmental shift. A short, concentrated burst of high-stakes pressure, followed by resolution. The system activates, peaks, completes its cycle, and returns to baseline. That is the sequence it was built for. What it encounters in modern life is structurally different. Not one strong signal that resolves cleanly, but a continuous low-level stream of moderate signals that never fully clear. Deadlines that roll into each other. Conversations that carry unresolved weight. Environments that keep your threat detection system partially engaged hour after hour. Day after day, without ever delivering the resolution signal the cycle was designed to reach. Research tracking cardiovascular markers across 8-week periods shows that sustained low-grade activation keeps baseline heart rate measurably elevated, not enough to feel dramatic, but enough to shift your body's default operating state in ways that compound quietly over time. Within 4 weeks of that sustained elevation, heart rate variability begins to decrease. Within 8 weeks, your brain's stress response system shows measurable adaptation to the elevated baseline. Your body recalibrates around what it experiences most consistently. And if what it experiences most consistently is a heart running slightly above its natural resting point, that elevated state gradually becomes the new biological normal. You don't feel it as acute pressure, you feel it as a low ceiling on your energy, as a restlessness without a clear source. As a baseline that never quite returns to the calm you remember feeling more easily before. That is not a personality trait. That is not aging. That is a heart that adapted precisely and efficiently to the signals it kept receiving. Your biology responded exactly as it was designed to. The only question is whether the environment it calibrated to is the one you actually want it running in. This is the part that changes how you see yourself. It doesn't go away once you see it. Every time your heart climbed in a moment that mattered, every time that surge hit your chest before a conversation that felt high stakes, a decision that carried real weight, a room full of people, you were not experiencing a failure of composure. You were not revealing something fragile. You were not proving that you couldn't handle pressure. You were watching a biological system do exactly what hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary refinement built it to do, preparing you, mobilizing your resources, bringing your entire physiological architecture fully online for something your body had already assessed as significant. The same heart rate surge that produces visible tension in one context produces peak physical output in another. The same Norepinephrine release, the same sinoatrial node firing rate, the same redistribution of oxygen and fuel toward your muscles and away from non-essential systems. The biology is identical. What changes is the context and the interpretation. Research tracking elite performers across sustained high-pressure events consistently shows that heart rate activation levels before those events were not lower than average. They were higher. What distinguished high performers was not a calmer heart. It was a nervous system that had built a fundamentally different relationship with that. Surge one that read the activation as preparation rather than threat. The biology was identical. The interpretation was different, and the outcome shifted entirely. Not because the body changed, because the story changed. By the time your heart rate returns to its resting baseline, typically between 20 and 40 minutes after peak activation, your body has completed a full mobilization and resolution cycle. Every resource redirected has been accounted for. Every system elevated has begun its return. The cycle completes itself with the same precision it began with. Every single time, without one error, without requiring your instruction or your awareness or your approval. Have you ever noticed how differently the exact same physical sensation can feel? That same climbing heart rate, that same pressure in your chest, depending entirely on the story you are telling yourself about what it means? That question reaches further than it first appears. Your heart beat faster before you knew why. It had already read the room, assessed the stakes, redistributed your biological resources, begun preparing your entire system. All of this completed before the conscious part of your mind had processed a single detail of what was happening around you. That is not a reaction. That is a biological intelligence that has been running this same preparation sequence for longer than your mind can meaningfully imagine. Operating on your behalf. Without interruption. Without recognition. Without ever needing you to understand what it was doing or why. The surge in your chest was never evidence of instability. It was never proof that you were too sensitive, too reactive, or too much. It was evidence of a system coming fully online, doing precisely what evolution spent an almost incomprehensible amount of time building it to do, in exactly the moment it was designed for. Your heart doesn't beat faster because something is wrong with you. It beats faster because something in your environment was recognized as significant, and your biology responded to that. Significance with every resource it had. That has always been the mechanism, running flawlessly. Every single time. You just didn't have the language for it until now.